I believe that the facts that had been conveyed by the president to the American people were not facts at all, were not sustained at all by the intelligence we had. And I believe that we had a right as citizens to know the exact reasons why we went to war, and if in fact we had been misled, or the intelligence had been misleading, we'd been misled into a war of choice rather than a true war of national security.
The reaction was very strong, not only against you, but against your family. Your wife was outed as a CIA agent. Why the ferocity of this response?
I expected them to come after me, and I thought that after 2 days, the press would focus less on me and more on the question of, if they misled the American people on this, what else might they have misled the American people on? They were successful in deflecting attention from them to me. And their strategy, perhaps because they had nothing else to use against me, was to betray my wife's identity as a covert CIA officer. That then changed the nature of the game. That was almost unprecedented. It's not often that you have family members of elected officials or appointed officials who are dragged into the public square to be administered a beating by the administration.
Was it a signal to everybody to shut up, to stay on their side, to stick with the agenda that they were pushing to the people?
I believe that, that they were sending a message to the intelligence community that if you do to us what Joe Wilson just did to us, we will do to you what we just did to his family. Be afraid, be very, very afraid. And in fact, a lot of the anonymous leaks related to intelligence matters dried up right after that.
So it succeeded.
There was nobody who was prepared to stand up and say that the administration had misled the American people, had lied us into a war of choice, effectively. Now, in our political discourse about that time, it's very rare to find somebody outside the extreme right who will talk about it other than in terms of, we were misled into a war of choice.
Why were they so intent, the Bush administration, on going to war? Why do you think that they carried on regardless of information that indicated that their base was wrong?
The president himself, in a campaign fundraiser, argued that they tried to kill his daddy. So it was very clear that they had, in my judgment, they had the intention of going to Iraq, and 9/11 provided them with the opportunity. They were ready to go. They just needed an opportunity to do it. And if you go back and you look at one of the documents that many members of the Bush administration had signed up to, was a document called the Project for the New American Century, in which it says quite clearly that in order to make their grandiose imperialistic ambitions come to life, you were going to need a cataclysmic event along the lines of Pearl Harbor. 9/11 provided them that.
Now, this was referred to as a project of a group called the neoconservatives, who were very powerful within the Bush administration. Are you saying that 9/11 provided essentially an excuse to push that global agenda?
I'm not sure it provided an excuse. It was certainly an opportunity that they seized. They always talked in terms of the way to peace in the Middle East is not through Jerusalem, it's through Baghdad. And so, yeah, I mean, it was exactly what they said they needed in order to actualize their ambitions.
What are the consequences, looking a decade later, what are the consequences of that decision to go into Iraq on the basis of the 9/11 attack?
I think the consequences to the United States have been really rather dire indeed. It's cost us blood, it's cost us treasure, but even more than that, it has cost us, I think, our moral standing and our international political leadership capacity in the world. Obviously, what it has done to the Iraqis and to some extent the Afghans as well as a consequence of the 10 years we've been in Afghanistan, I think has been even more dramatic. How long it will take for those societies to recover from 10 years of American occupation, I can't tell you.
Is the situation reversible, that global image of the US that has been created through US action over the past decade, is the process reversible?
I don't know. I'll say this. I think that the myth of the United States of America globally has been that we were a nation of laws and a nation that had a sense of what was morally acceptable. It would support human rights, who would support individual rights, support freedom of the press. Now I believe it's harder to make that case. I think we're probably seeing much more in the light of sort of traditional conquerors raping and pillaging to achieve our objectives in somebody else's land. And I don't see how that's reversible. It appalls me that Dick Cheney, on his current book tour, can openly talk about torture as an acceptable policy option. The question of torture in our country was settled 235 years ago when General Washington commanded the Revolutionary Army and said, "We will not torture." The United States leadership was essential to getting the Geneva Conventions passed, which outlawed torture. For us to turn our back on that tradition and allow this Manichean vision of Dick Cheney's to prevail changes the very nature of what we are as a society.
Your fellow diplomats, people in administrations, those that you negotiated with, had many terms for you, many words for you, pugnacious probably one of the most pleasant, yet you always came across as a very proud American operating for a country and a system in which you believed. Do you feel betrayed?
Certainly, the vision of America that was articulated and acted on during the Bush administration is not a vision of my country that I share. And I think I've been very clear about that. I was already out of government when the Bush administration came into office, so I feel that my own sort of values and the values that we espoused when I was a diplomat have been betrayed by the actions of the Bush administration, most certainly.
And this administration, the administration of Barack Obama, is it turning things around?
I think it's very, very disappointing that the President and the Justice Department opted not to investigate credible claims of crimes against humanity and war crimes, and now are apparently complicit in some of them.
Finally, is this very fact an indication of how deep the impact on the moral basis, the ethical basis, the legal basis of a society that has resulted over the past decade?
Oh, I think it has changed. I think it's changed American society in many, many ways. I think part of what you see is a society that has been governed by fear and has become very fearful over the past decade. Scaring people is a way to stay in power, and the Bush administration was very, very effective in that. And when people are scared, people adopt positions that in other times they might not, including attitudes towards things like foreigners or people of different religious faith. But I also think that there is, within our society, there are elements that have almost institutionalized this fear-mongering. And it's profitable. And it attracts adherents, and it's self-perpetuating, basically. And that's what we need to fight against.